I'd like to welcome everybody to the Planning Commission meeting of March 3rd. Could we have our public announcements, please?
Before we begin the agenda, the Wichita-Sedgwick County Metropolitan Area Planning Commission and the Wichita-Sedgwick County Board of Zoning Appeals would like to take this opportunity to welcome everyone to this public hearing. For those in attendance, copies of the agenda for today's meeting, the public hearing procedure, and Planning Department staff reports on all agenda items are available in the lobby. The Planning Commission's and the BZA's bylaws limit the applicant on a zoning, subdivision, or variance application and his or her representatives to a total of 10 minutes of speaking time at the start of the hearing on that item, plus up to 2 minutes at the conclusion of that hearing. All other persons wishing to speak on agenda items are limited to 3 minutes per person. However, if they feel that it is needed and justified, the chairman may extend these times by up to 2 minutes. All speakers are requested to state his or her name and address for the record when beginning to speak. When you are finished speaking, please share your name, address, and the case number on the sheet provided in the room. This will enable staff to notify you if there are any additional proceedings concerning that item. All speakers at the podium, please remove your face mask before speaking into the microphone. Please note that all written and visual materials you present to the Commission and the Board will be retained by the Secretary as part of the official record. If you are not speaking, but you wish to be notified about future proceedings on a particular case, please provide your contact information to the Planning Department. The Planning Commission and the Board are interested in hearing the views of all persons who wish to express themselves on all the agenda items. However, we ask that all speakers please be as courteous and concise as possible and avoid long repetitions of facts or opinions which have already been stated. For your information, the Wichita City Council has adopted a policy for all city zoning items. A copy of this policy is available from the planning staff. The City Council relies on a written record of the Planning Commission hearings and does not conduct its own additional public hearings on these items. The decision of the BZA is final. Any appeal of a decision of the BZA is to the district court.
Thank you. Next item is a roll call.
Yes, sir. Bill Johnson?
Here.
Fox?
Present.
McKay is absent. Green?
Here.
Dool?
Here.
Blick? We will unmute the phones just in case he's one of those. Mr.
Here, present.
Thank you. Caller number 3. Nix?
Here.
Foster?
Here.
Warren?
Here.
Joe Johnson? Mr. Joe Johnson? Absent. Miles?
Present.
Hartman?
Here.
Florence? Mr. Terrell Florence? Absent. Cunningham?
Here.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 members present, sir.
Next item is to approve the prior MAPC meeting minutes of February 17th.
Move to approve as presented.
Second.
Got a motion approved by Mr. Warren, second by Ms. Foster. Any discussion?
I abstain.
We got one abstention. 3? Okay. Any discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? 803.
Yes, sir.
Okay, the subdivision items 2.1. We'll go through the agenda and see which ones we can take on consent. 2.1 is a subdivision item 2022-00003. Final plat, Don and Darrell addition. Anybody on the commission want to hear this case? Any of the commissioners that are virtual want to hear this case? Anybody in the chamber here want to hear this case? Anybody virtual want to hear this case? Hearing none, we'll take that on consent. 2.2, subdivision 2022-00005, one-step final plat. Anybody on the commission want to hear this case? Any of the commissioners that are virtual want to hear this case? Anybody in the commission chambers want to hear this case? Anybody virtual want to hear this case? We'll take that on consent. Next one, subdivision 2022-00006. One-step final plat, hydraulic substation addition. Anybody on the commission want to hear this case? How about the commissioners that are virtual want to hear this case? Anybody in the commission chambers want to hear this case? Anybody virtual want to hear this case? We'll take that on consent. Next one, subdivision 2022-00007, one-step final plat, Oakville Substation Addition. Anybody on the commission want to hear this case? Any of the commissioners that are virtual do want to hear this case? Anybody in the commission chambers want to hear this case? Anybody virtual want to hear this case? We'll take it on consent.
Excuse me? Did we get a chance to speak up?
Go ahead.
My name is Ken Dumper. Lived on this block for 45 years.
Which case?
Former member of the Historic Preservation Board. And
What case are you, what case?
really clear that the Park Place and View Historic District is unique.
Mr. Dumford? Mr. Dumford?
Yes.
We're going through the agenda right now to find out which items can be taken on consent. Currently, they're going through the subdivision items, so the 2.1, 2.2. They will work on getting to the public hearing items. I believe you're speaking about a public hearing item, maybe 4.7 or 4.8. So they're not quite to that item to figure out whether or not to take it on consent.
I apologize for not knowing the priorities here. I'm sorry.
Chairman, I would move for approval of items 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, and 2.4.
Second.
Got a motion to approve by Ms. Fox, second by Ms. Miles. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
And Mr. Chairman,
11-0.
just a note that Joe Johnson has joined us, Commissioner Joe Johnson.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to go to public hearing, vacation items. Vacation 2022-00001. Anybody on the commission want to hear this case? Any of the commissioner virtual want to hear this case? Anybody in the commission chambers want to hear this case? Anybody virtual want to hear this case? Seeing none, we'll take it on consent. Next one's vacation case 2022-00002. Anybody on the commission want to hear this case? How about the commissioners that are virtual? Do you want to hear this case? Anybody in the commission chambers want to hear this case? Anybody virtual want to hear this case? We'll take it on consent. I have a motion to approve 3.1.
Move for approval, items 3.1 and 3.2.
Got a motion to approve by Mr. Hartman, second by Nix. Sorry. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, now we're going to go into public hearings. PUD 2022-00001, which was an item, was deferred from February 17th. Anybody on the commission want to hear this case? How about any of the commissioners that are virtual want to hear this case? Anybody? You want to hear it or just answer the question? Okay, anybody in the commission chambers want to hear this item? Anybody virtual want to hear this item? Mr. Green's got a question. I think I'll go ahead and have him ask it.
Yes, sir.
My question is concerning the height of the sign, proposed sign. The comments made about the elevation of the roadway and if that could factor into the height of the sign. And I was wondering if we had any idea of what the height of that elevated roadway.
We don't, and that's why the recommended PUD language is written the way it is we are affording the opportunity for higher than 30 feet with the submission of a site and exhibit that gives us those elevations. At DAB last night, the agent for the applicant said that they didn't do a survey initially on the site, but they plan to do one and provide those elevations to the planning department. Where the initial request was for a 50-foot sign, we're restricting it to 30, but allowing it up to 50 if they provide the documentation to merit the additional height.
Thank you for that point of clarification.
Not a problem.
Any other questions? Matt or Philip? Thank you. We'll take that on consent. 4.2 PUD 2022-00002 has been deferred until May 5th meeting. 4.3 zoning case 2022-00003. Anybody on the commissioner want to hear this case? How about the commissioners that are virtual? Want to hear this? Anybody in the commission chamber want to hear this item? Anybody virtual? Take that on consent. Next one's 4.4, zoning 2022-00004. Anybody on the commission want to hear this case? Any of the commissioners that are virtual want to hear this case? Anybody in the commission chamber want to hear this case? Anybody virtual want to hear this case? Take it on consent. Next one, zoning case 2022-00005. Anybody on the commission want to hear this case? How about the commissioners that are virtual want to hear this case? Anybody in the commission chamber want to hear this case? Anybody virtual want to hear this case? We'll take that on consent. The next one's 4.6, zoning case 2022-00006. Anybody on the commission want to hear this case? How about the commissioners that are virtual want to hear this case? I need to ask staff though, the applicant's not in agreement with what you're requesting.
That is correct.
Okay, we're going to hear this case. 4.7, zoning 2022-00007. Anybody on the commission want to hear this case? How about the commissioners that are virtual? Anybody in the commission chambers want to hear this item? We will hear that case. .8, zoning case 2022-00008. Anybody on the commission want to hear this case? How about the commission members that are virtual want to hear this case? Anybody in the commission chamber want to hear this case? Anybody virtual want to hear this case? Take it on consent. Next item is zoning case 2022-00009. Anybody on the commission want to hear this case? How about the commissioners that are virtual want to hear this case? Anybody in the commission chamber want to hear this case? We'll hear this case.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve items 4.1, 4.3, 4.4, 4.5, and 4.8.
Second.
Got a motion by Mr. Green, second by Ms. Fox. Any discussion?
It's per staff comments.
Sure.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? All right, first item we'll hear will be item 4.6, zoning case 2022-00006.
Yes, good afternoon. Philip Zievenbergen with planning staff. Zone 2206 is not a zone change request, but an amendment to the protective overlay number 167 for property that is zoned general commercial located on the north side of West Kellogg, about halfway within a half mile west of South Tyler Road. The property was zoned general commercial in 2005, and that's when the protective overlay was established. Protective overlays are typically established, especially in contexts like this, where you have freeway frontage, which is appropriate for general commercial zoning, but you also have the proximity to low-density residential on the north side of Dubin Avenue. And this particular protective overlay was put in place for the protection of the residential properties to the north. And the applicant is requesting several amendments to the protective overlay, not necessarily for a particular use. The warehousing use that they're proposing is already permitted by right in general commercial, and that's not in question today. The applicant's amendments are requesting changes to some of the other development standards in terms of the placement of the wall, the architectural style of the building, and how some of that could affect the required landscaping on the site. Just for you guys' reference, the proposed development is only on this western lot right here. It's lots 1, 2, and 3 of the Westport 3rd edition, I believe. But either way, the protective overlay applies to all 3 lots, but the proposed development is only part of the western lot, as you would see in the site plan that's attached in your staff report. So that's the only real lot we're actually in question. But if the amendment to the protective overlay were to go through, it actually technically affects all 3, unless additional language is added to the protective overlay that would only allow certain lessening of restrictions to one particular or not or the other. Staff would recommend that we treat the protective overlay as a whole and make sure that it applies equally to each property in the future. So what the applicant is requesting is a few things. Number one, the protective overlay requires that the building not have a predominant exterior metal facade, so really no metal building. They would like to have a metal building for their warehouse. Number two, the protective overlay requires the 8-foot masonry screening wall to be set back 20 feet from the property line along Dubin. So if you actually go to the aerial image, it's a little bit closer in, we can see. So this property line right here, the wall would have to be set back, so set to the south of that 20 feet. Just a note about that, the building can be placed on the property line. During the zoning action that established the current zoning and the protective overlay, it was permitted that the building be allowed to be built on the property line, and it acts kind of as its own natural screening. But the wall has to be set back 20 feet, and that's to give space for the required landscaping that's in the protective overlay. Part of the protective overlay says that the wall and the building facade would have to share the similar architectural type, texture, color, so that's more of a uniform thing. So that's also in question here. If you allow a metal building, what do you do with those architectural controls as well? And then finally, when you have, if you were to allow the wall to be placed on the property line like the building, you would significantly impact the ability to install the required landscaping that's in the protective overlay. Interesting note about this protective overlay is that it does allow landscaping to be planted in the right-of-way, as long as there is a use of right-of-way permit obtained by the Public Works and Utilities Department. Staff confirmed with Public Works and Utilities, knowing this was established in 2005, now in 2022, if this would still be amenable to them, and they said yes, as long as there is a use of right-of-way permit, we would allow landscaping to be installed in the right-of-way, with the understanding that if any future road improvements were done along Dubin, that the applicant would be responsible for replacing any of the landscaping that has to be torn out in order to make those improvements. So that's not in question, but you still would have a significantly less amount of space, and it's just not optimal to have landscaping in the right-of-way knowing it could be torn out versus having the landscaping on their property not in question of being torn out if you ever have to have any road improvements. So that is what the request is. Staff is recommending, the only concession staff is recommending to the protective overlay is to allow the metal building. And staff recommendation is that the metal building be painted in the same or similar color to the wall so you don't have major contrasting colors. Knowing you can treat the facade of the building a little bit differently, you can control the color. We're fine with it being metal. We just want it to be the same or a similar color to the wall. Staff is not in favor of having the wall be put on the property line. We want that 20-foot barrier to allow for the required landscaping, with the understanding that the landscaping behind the building would be put in the right-of-way, and that's text in the protective overlay the way it is now. If the building is allowed to be on the property line, they would almost have to put the landscaping in the right-of-way if they build to their, and we're okay with that. That minimizes the amount of space in the right-of-way that landscaping is being installed. We would like the wall to continue to be set back 20 feet so that you have that space for the landscaping. In conversation with the applicant via email, that is the sticking point that they are not in agreement with. They would still like 100% of their request to have that wall be on the property line. We would still require landscaping, it just might affect the amount. And definitely the placement of it being in the right-of-way just brings it in the question of possibly having to have it torn out if there's any road improvements. So overall staff, again, is recommending approval subject to the amended text of the protective overlay in your staff report. Again, our recommendation is to allow metal building, but it needs to share a same or similar color to the wall, but not change any language regarding the placement of the wall or the landscaping that's required. Staff, some of the amended language in the protective overlay is just kind of updating some of the language regarding, it's no longer the central superintendent of central inspection, there's the zoning administrator. So some of that language is just updating it. It wasn't necessarily in contention with but if we're already changing the protective overlay, we might as well update it while we're at it. So this area is identified for commercial uses. And again, the use that's requested of a warehouse is not in question. In speaking with individuals on the phone, neighbors in the area who have concerns about the potential project, Reiterating that to them is we're not talking about whether or not a warehouse can be built here. A warehouse can be built by right because of the zoning. We're just talking about the aesthetics of the protective overlay that are in question. The other thing that I just want to say more for the record for anybody listening as well, if I haven't spoken to them, is access to the site, which was determined at the time of platting, is restricted to Kellogg only. That was a question that was brought up, and rightly so. Residents were concerned of possibly having entrances off of Dubin, which is a gravel road, and there's complete access control completely along Dubin and Seville Street, which is the access street right here. All the access is off of Kellogg. Again, not germane to the zoning action today, but again, it was just brought up in public comment, so I figured I'd state it for your guys' benefit as well as for anybody listening here, that would take a separate action, that the zoning action today would not change where access would be on the site. So I will leave it at that, and I can stand for any questions you might have for me.
Any questions of Philip? Now, Philip, you're saying that the screen walls are got to be 20 foot off the property line, both on Dugan and Kellogg?
No, the screening wall is only along Dubin.
Okay.
It's only required along Dubin. The applicant is not questioning the height. It's required to be 8 feet, and that wasn't part of their amendment.
Okay.
They weren't amending the height. They were just amending the placement of it, wanting to be on the property line versus 20 feet set off the property line.
But there's no access to the lot from Dugan?
Correct.
Thank you.
Question, Philip. If they're only developing the westernmost lot here, if they had only changed the zone of the westernmost lot, then they would only have to do a masonry fence along that lot?
That is our understanding, knowing these lots can be individually owned and sold separately. Currently, they're under one ownership, and my understanding is they are selling the western lot to the contract buyer who wants to develop this warehouse. And though the protective overlay applies to all of it, when it comes to actually developing it, you know, if somebody were to come in and buy lot one today and adhere to all of the regulations within the protective overlay and build a warehouse and build the wall, they would only build it for the length of their property. So unfortunately, these will only be developed individually. The decision today will affect the entirety of the protective overlay, but in terms of the development of the property, they truly are only responsible for building their portion of it, knowing if the entity was developing all 3 lots at the same time, they would have to do it. But just the western lot is in question, and the other 2 can be bought and sold separately from each other, that they are just developing the one lot at a time.
That's just what I wanted clarified. I was trying to picture whether they had to build a masonry wall along this entire length, but if it's just the lot they're developing, that's a
Staff had a conversation about that as well, of just probably not a reasonable requirement to have one property owner develop almost a quarter mile of masonry wall when, one, they don't own 2/3 of it, and it's also not being developed, like that being an overarching requirement and be overburdensome on an applicant when they don't own those other 2 properties.
Thank you. Just
Any other questions for Philip?
Yeah, I've got one. How much right-of-way do you need for landscaping?
Typically, our landscape buffers are planted within a 15-foot space. They don't have to require 15 feet. There's about 17 or 18 feet between the roadway, because there's no curbs, the roadway and the property line, measured on GIS, so it's approximate. So there is sufficient space there to plant shade trees and other landscaping as required by the protective overlay. It's just not ideal knowing it's right of way and not the private property owner's property.
Yeah, no, if they were to eventually pave, is it Dubin, I'm sure that there would be 14 and a half feet.
Right, they would likely
Between the
expand,
back of
right, they would
curb
likely
and the
expand
fence.
the roadway with curb and gutter and have less right of way. That's not roadway.
Any other, go ahead.
The requirement is that the fence and the building be of similar color to match up as best we can. That's on the lot that's on the number. The other lots, do they have to match the first one? Are you gonna have 3 different?
I was gonna say, The way it's written, it says building walls shall be of the same or similar color to screening walls. Screening walls shall be connected to building walls. I would say it'd be open for interpretation, but it would make sense that they would all match each other. The way it's written, I feel like that could be interpreted that, you know, if this owner paints it some, you know, neutral tan color, that it would be expected that it match down the way. But
Yes,
that might be a question for law.
I guess that's the question we've got to say, do we want to mandate that, or
That-
it does leave it up for
It could be good
interpretation?
to
where-
potentially clarify
Yeah.
that through this action of knowing the protective overlay applies to all three properties, that all three properties have a similar color scheme when it comes to, you know, whatever color this masonry wall turns into, then it has to be matched if the other properties develop.
Well, the request is for all 3 lots.
The amendment to the
But the
protective
construction
overlay
is
would
only-
apply to all three, even though they're only looking to develop one of them.
Right. So I don't know if there'd really be any interpretation there. I think it would, if we're approving the request as presented, that would be all 3 lots, even though they're just
Right. Because the amendment to the protective.
developing the west.
Right. They're just developing one, they just have to amend the entire protective overlay.
Any other questions, Philip?
Yeah.
The protective overlay is meant to protect these residential properties, and it was originally not a metal building. So does that mean if they're allowed metal building, it can be all the rest of the way down there too?
Correct. If that concession is made in today's action, that would allow for metal buildings to be built on the other properties.
Any other questions? Applicant or agent, please. Give us your name and address, please.
Dwayne Dugan with Maple and Ridge LLC, 10180 Southwest Boulevard, Wichita, Kansas, 67215. And I am one of the owners, representing the owner, but I'm one of the owners of the land that we are trying to sell, or at least the west lot we're trying to sell. Phil did a good job. I don't have I guess we are asking for you to delete the 20-foot wall setback, because normally all the commercial lots that we deal with, that we have, are at least 250 feet deep. On this one, we are starting out already as a narrow lot at 122, and so that's less than half of the normal commercial lot that we have. And then you're asking whoever develops these lots to take another 20 feet out of the lot. And it virtually makes the lots unusable. We acquired from the city these particular parcels back in about 2005, and for the last 17 years, we have been unable to sell any of these. And normally, or always, it's because when they look at this protective overlay, they look at that screening wall requirement and the 20-foot easement, my prospects always go away. When you look at the property to the east, and it was replatted, I believe, in 2011. There they have a 5-foot wall setback, and there is no wall. So if you look at Byron and Dubin, and the east side of Byron, the trees that are there, I guess it's the landscaping, are within 3 feet of the roadway, and the construction equipment parked there is backed up against the trees. My point there is what we are asking our development with the screening wall being on the line will look much better than that. And so we're good with the wall. We just want it to be in line with the building. And then because you want some landscaping in the right of way for the building, it would be no different for the screening wall. So again, my name is Dwayne Dugan, 10180 Southwest Boulevard, Wichita, Kansas, 67215. Case number ZON 2022-00006.
Any questions? What, Mr. Warren?
You heard the discussion about the other lots that may get developed at a later date in
Yes.
terms of screening and materials on the building. Do you have an opinion or a thought on that?
Well, it's probably, I guess I was when I read the protective overlay, I thought they were all going to have to be in a similar color and wall anyway. So, and I think we would, as far as the wall goes, I mean, you can ask the person who's buying the west lot, or hope that he buys west lot, to do maybe a brick pattern or something on the wall that it would look very pleasing for the neighbors.
Ms. Foster?
I'm looking at the dimensions of the lot, and the two edges are for parking lot. You got 120 feet roughly with 20-foot building setbacks. So that leaves you something like 100 feet, which I make out to be enough to do a 3-row, 2-lane, 2-aisle parking easily. So with the extra 20 foot, you could maybe get one more, do a 2-aisle, 4 rows of parking. So you're losing 1 row of parking to the 20-foot landscape. My question is, how much parking does whatever is going in here going to need, that they need parking that is, twice what the area of the building is?
No, that's a good question. I think in this case, with the warehouse use, they have trucks coming in and they just need the room for the access of the trucks to come in and to go out. It's not really just, it's not parking per se.
I hear what you're saying, but it seems to me 100 feet is enough for a truck to maneuver in and out.
Guess it depends upon the size of the truck.
Yeah, the trucks are pretty long.
Well, and you got,
And to get turned around and backed up.
and you got Kellogg also to access the property. Which it probably isn't legal, but it's done all the time. Any other questions, Mr. Dugan? Seeing none, thank you. Is there anybody else in the commission like to speak on this item? Anybody else in the chamber want to talk on this item? Is there anybody virtual that wants to talk on this item?
This is Commissioner Blick. Can you hear me?
Yes?
Question. I know that we talked about similar style with the retaining wall, and I was thinking about how East Kellogg, where you have those big retaining walls, where they do sound dampening, and it's kind of color matched and similar design to what Kellogg is, with the kind of that light shade of brown or taupe or whatever. Would that be similar, or can we actually do a restriction to put that on there, or not, or is it just whatever is like the adjacent neighborhood? Just for staff comment.
I, for one, feel like we ought to have some flexibility to let them come up with a nice design rather than us designing it. That's my opinion.
I agree with you. I was just wondering if the color would be matching similar to like how Kellogg is, that lighter color or not.
That would be one choice.
Mr. Blick, to your question, I guess you could put more design parameters on the wall. It just is whether or not it would be the will of the board to add those additional restrictions or not.
I doubt it. Thank you though so much for your input.
Is there anybody virtual that want to speak on this item? Hearing none, I'll bring it back to commission. What's the pleasure of the board?
Will there eventually be sidewalk required on Dubin?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that question. I know the subdivision regulations, if a new subdivision is going in, they require a sidewalk on one side of the street on collector streets. I believe Dubin would be considered a collector street. Whether or not, if it's petitioned to be paved in the future, knowing that's usually done by the property owners, I guess it would potentially be whether or not the property owners would want to include in their petition the construction of a sidewalk. I don't know, knowing it's not an arterial, I don't know what the city's program is for going in and putting in sidewalks on collector streets. I know they've got a program for installing sidewalks on arterials, but likelihood the pavement of Dubin would be potentially done by petition sought from the residents versus the city choosing to go out and pave it. Whether it would include a sidewalk, I'm not really versed on. If they go to pave a collector street, does it then automatically include a sidewalk?
Mike, are you thinking both sides of the street or just one side?
I'm just posing a question to see if there's going to be a defined barrier at the property line, whether it be the fence as the developer is requesting, or if we were to go 20 feet, if there would still be a sidewalk there that would be a defined point, a defined line, I guess.
Mr. Nix?
I don't know whether I heard correctly, but I mean, it would seem to me that this is a very desirable piece of property, and can't remember how long it's been for sale. The applicant said 15 years or something.
Since
to that effect.
2005.
And so there, I mean, there's a reason. I mean, it looks to me like it should have sold before now and have been developed. If we're squabbling over 20 feet when it would be legal to move that wall back 20 feet, I'd lean that direction myself.
Is that a motion?
Not necessarily a motion, just comment.
I would make a motion.
Okay, go ahead.
I'd make a motion to approve, eliminating the requirement that the fence setback be 20 foot, but that it be even with the back of the building.
So the fence would be on the property line?
Fence would be on the property line.
That's the motion I wanted to make, so I'll second it.
Got a motion by Mr. Warren, second by Mr. Green. Any discussion?
I do have a question. Is staff comfortable with the wording of the existing overlay that all three lots would be of similar materials and colors?
Yeah.
Okay.
And this motion would still include some landscaping with the
Yes.
owner
Correct.
recognizing it's in
recognizing
the
they
right of
would have to
way.
get a use of
If it's-
easement permit or use a right-of-way permit from Public Works and install it in the right-of-way.
Minor street privilege,
Yep.
is that what it is? Yeah.
Any other discussion? Let's do a roll call.
One more question on that. So the proposed landscaping plan would have to be approved by
Correct.
your office, staff? Yeah. Okay.
And just taking some quick notes. So.
Need to learn shorthand.
Yeah, I do.
Hurry up before Mr. Green has another question.
Okay, here's the motion. The motion motion is to approve, and that is with elimination of the requirement for a 20-foot setback, with the staff understanding that the wall would be similar color throughout the entire property for the change in the protective overlay, and understanding that the landscaping plan will need to be reviewed and approved. So the roll call on that vote. Bill Johnson?
Yes?
Fox?
Yes.
John McKay is absent. Green?
Yes.
Dool? Yes. Blick?
Yes.
Nix?
Yes.
Foster?
Yes.
Warren?
Yes.
Joe Johnson?
Yes.
Miles?
Aye.
Hartman?
Yes.
Florence is absent. Cunningham?
Yes.
Guess we didn't need to
Unanimous
have a
vote.
roll call. Next item. Zoning case 2022-00007.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is Matt Williams for the Planning Department. Zone 2022-7 is a request for the rezoning of a property at 1641 North Fairview from TF3 two-family to MF29 multifamily residential. The subject site is currently developed with 2 residential buildings and a parking area. The buildings date back to the 1930s and have previously been split into a total of 6 dwelling units. The applicant desires to remodel and add on to the existing dwelling units, but the total future number of dwelling units has not yet been decided. The MF29 zoning district, if approved, would allow up to a maximum of 12 dwelling units on this site. Off-street parking will be provided at the rear of the property with access off of both Fairview and the existing alley. The property is located within the Park Place Fairview Historic District. The Wichita Historic Preservation Board would need to review and approve the designs of this addition or new construction prior to the issuance of any building permits. As you can see on this zoning map here, most of the properties on this block are zoned TF3 two-family, but there are several properties on the block to the north and the block to the south that are zoned MF29. That's the light green color you see there. The 2035 Wichita Future Growth Concept Map and the Comprehensive Plan identifies the site as appropriate for residential. The Midtown Neighborhood Plan depicts the subject site as appropriate for single detached or duplex uses. When that plan was created, the assumption is that this property had already been developed into multifamily. It might not have been known at the time when that plan was being developed. Staff is recommending approval of this request. We have received multiple comments from neighbors. Those comments should have been provided to you. Some of the comments we got were worries about the additional parking in an area, the noise that might be created, and then the density within the historic district. So I'd be happy to go through some of the photos of this site. So here right now you can see the 2 existing buildings. Next slide, please. This is a site plan and a mock-up that was included in the application. The applicant did say that this was not for sure what was going to happen. This shows a couple additional dwelling units being created, but this is not the final plan. Next slide, please. This is a photo of the site looking west. You can see the drive aisle along the south side of the property that goes back to the parking in the back and then the alleyway as well. Next slide, please. This is a property to the south. Next slide. Property to the north. Next slide. And this is the property across the street. Be happy to answer any questions on this. Yes.
When you say the drive goes back to the alley, you can't get into the alley though, can you?
That's correct. Right now that there's no access to the alley.
Okay.
But the applicant has indicated that that would be opened up if this were approved.
Is it a
Well,
wooden,
I drove down that alley. I'd seriously doubt
Yeah, I did drive
if
down
it
as
ever
well.
rains again that you're going to be able to get down that alley. But, I mean, I don't know why you'd open it up. It's not open up anywhere else, is it?
I believe some of those properties have access. Some of the comments I got were that it was a pretty well-used alley. I know it's not in best shape right now.
Any other questions?
I have one. This is a triple listed historic property. Did you have a lot of comments on that?
A number of the comments that were provided mentioned the historic nature of the area and the building, yes.
Well, when I look at this aerial picture, it doesn't really seem to match the plan. And the plan seems to be of 1 unit, ground floor and upper floor. It doesn't look like we have a detailed plan. And one call that I got said that they'd talked to the owner and he was talking about 14 units. So this is going to go from 12 units, from 6 units to 12 units in the middle of a I mean, this is right smack in the middle of a block that is doing really well taking care of their properties, all except for this one. I guess I'd like to hear more from the people. And is everybody going to be expected to drive down the driveway, all 12 people, and park back there, or are they going to continue to park in the front yard?
Parking in the front yard would not be allowed under the zoning code.
Okay. I don't know. I was pretty disappointed in the layout of the plan because it was illegible. Even when I blew it up on a graphic computer, it was illegible. So I don't know. I don't know what to think. Is the applicant here? I guess we can hear from the people.
I'm not sure if, I have not met the applicant in person, if they're here or online. Bel Air Apartments or Excel Custom Construction.
I understand that this is in an historical area.
Mm-hmm.
Is this property listed on the historical register?
On 3.
Yeah, my understanding is that it's triple listed.
It is?
On the local, state,
This
and
particular
national.
property is
That's my understanding, yes.
triple listed, okay.
And that's why if there's any of the design changes would have to be approved by the historic board.
Okay.
Any other questions? Applicant or agent? Applicant or agent? Applicant or agent?
Well, been down this road before, have we not? And it seems
we
to me
go?
that we've decided that if we have questions, of which we have many questions, it appears, from the audience anyway, we either need to defer, well, we need to defer it for sure. I don't know how long, but until we get somebody here.
Mr. Warren?
I would be ready to make a motion to defer, but we've got a lot of people that have wanted to make comments, and so before I do that, I would say let's open it up for public hearing. Let's hear what
I'd
people
like
have
to
to
see
say.
how many is here on this item.
We've
And
got at least
online.
one online.
I'm waiting.
I'm waiting.
I would like to speak.
Okay, hang on, please.
Me too.
If we want to take comments from these folks, I'm happy to give the applicant a call and see if they can jump on real quick.
I'll do that while that's going on. Mr. Johnson, one quick note. I just want to touch base with Mr. Jeff Van Zant, the legal counsel for the city. Just want to make sure that we can take public comment without the applicant being here. So, Jeff, if you're on.
Let me ask you, should we go on to item 9 while we get this sorted out?
Mr. Chairman, that's my preference because the problem is if members of the public speak, the applicant not being here does not give them the proper opportunity for rebuttal.
They should be there.
You could defer it to the end of the agenda and let the opportunity to try to call them, and then you can go from there at that point.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we place this item at the end of the agenda, giving staff the opportunity to try to get a hold of the agent or applicant.
Second.
Second.
Okay, we're going to go to item 4.9, zoning case 2022-00009.
Do we need to vote on that motion?
We're not voting on that
Yes, it needs to be voted upon to defer to the end of the,
Okay. We got a motion. Got a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Warren to move this item to the end of the agenda. All in favor, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Okay, we're gonna move it. Now we're gonna go to item 4.9. Zoning case 2022-00009.
Okay, so this is a request for the rezoning of a property at 5400 North Sedgwick from neighborhood retail to general commercial. And this was just recently finalized, the zoning to neighborhood retail. That's why it's not indicated on this map. The applicant is seeking to rezone the property to operate a food truck on the site. The subject property is currently undeveloped, but gravel has been placed on a portion of the site. As shown on the attached site plan, the applicant intends to locate a 20 by 6 foot mobile food trailer along 53rd Street. The applicant has indicated that they plan to provide a parking area on the site, and they will have access off of North Sedgwick Avenue, and that access has been recently poured. All parking areas will need to be surfaced with concrete or asphalt. There are single-family homes located to the north and east of this site. The property west of the site is zoned limited commercial and developed with a convenience store, and the property south of this site across 53rd Street is zoned and developed commercially. An existing wood fence acts as screening on the north and west sides of the property. A landscape street yard per the Wichita Landscape Ordinance may act as screening in the front setback and along the east. In 2009, the property was rezoned from single-family residential to neighborhood retail. This was only recently finalized, as I just talked about. Staff is recommending approval of the request, subject to the protective overlay in your staff report, and that protective overlay limits the uses of the site to all of those within the neighborhood retail zoning, except with the addition of the mobile food truck in the city. The protective overlay also limits the hours of the food truck due to the neighboring residential units, and would limit that to ceasing operation by 11 p.m. on Sunday through Thursday, and then by 1 a.m. on Friday and Saturday nights. I have received a few calls about this case from neighbors. There were concerns with this being so close to residential and about the additional traffic that might be on Sedgwick Road. Happy to go through some of these photos. Here's an aerial showing that convenience store just to the west, and then the nearest house to the north, and then to the east across Sedgwick. Next slide. They're showing the community investment plan depicting this as appropriate for residential, which also does allow for pockets of commercial. Next slide. Here's a site plan showing where the food truck would be and the setback off of 53rd Street in Sedgwick. Next slide. Here's a picture of the site now. As I said, there's some gravel on the site. That will not be suitable for the parking. It will have to be asphalt or concrete. Next slide. Here's some of the residences. This one to the east. Next slide. Here's another look of the approach from Sedgwick. Next slide. Here is the residence to the north. Next slide. And then the commercial to the south. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Mr. Nix?
The lot is 4.5 acres, and the proposal is to put a 20-foot by 6-foot food truck along 53rd, somewhere along 53rd, close to 53rd, close to that access, I assume. So would the applicant be required to pave that entire lot?
No, they wouldn't be required to pave the entire lot. They would have to provide parking that would be determined later based on a parking study prepared by the applicant. So whatever parking that they're required to provide, they would need to pave that portion of the lot, but not the whole portion.
But not the whole lot?
No.
Okay.
Ms. Foster?
Is the access that was in the photograph you showed a moment ago off 53rd or off Sedgwick?
It's off of Sedgwick.
And there is and will not be an access off 53rd, is that?
That's correct. I spoke to the traffic engineer, and the only access would be off of Sedgwick.
Any other questions? Ms. Cunningham?
One, are those hours typical? Seems like it's awfully late.
Those
Weekdays.
were just some guidance that staff came up with. I know that we've had some other projects in the last few years where we, they were close to residential and we put some hours on there. Looking at the hours of this food truck at other locations, it appears they might be open till 2 a.m. every morning. So that's why we tried to push it back a little bit. That's just based on another restaurant. I can't guarantee that's what they're hoping
Mr.
for
Nix?
here.
Did you mention lighting at all?
Did not mention lighting, no. I believe there are standards in the zoning code for lighting that they would have to.
There's not any there now, so.
Correct.
All right.
Matt, do you know what the hours are on the convenience store to the west?
I do not know what the hours are for that, although I'm assuming it's probably 24 hours.
And then across Meridian's Walmart?
Correct.
It's 24/7?
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions, Matt? Applicant or agent? Applicant or agent? Applicant or agent, please come forward.
She's sitting right there. She just doesn't understand what you're saying.
You guys would give us your name and address, please.
Adam Dominguez, 9711 North 119th West, Sedgwick, Kansas. Yeah.
Okay, I'm Felipe.
Please remove your mask, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. Felipe Hernandez, same address.
Okay.
So,
Pretty much, we just opened this lot because, we've been paying a lot of taxes on it, so we're just trying to make something, make some money for us, I guess. And we've been paying on it for 2000.
I don't know, early 2000.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
Are you in agreement with staff comments?
What was that?
Are you in agreement with staff comments?
Yes. Yes.
Any questions of the applicant?
Yeah, you do realize that the gravel that you have for parking currently will not be sufficient for the parking that's going to be required. You'll need to put either asphalt or concrete. Okay, how much we should get, how many feet from the street either way? Or half of that property, or I'm thinking about the cost, that's what I'm thinking. Oh, I understand, but that's one of the requirements that is before you. Staff might be able to assist with that, or?
It's based on the size of the...
Yeah, I would say that, that's not a part of this zone change request. That's just a part of commercial, providing parking for commercial property. The size of that will be determined after that parking study that the applicant's going to need to provide comes back.
You have any comment on that?
Good afternoon, J.R. Cox, Metropolitan Planning. No, sir, not really, not beyond what Matt said. And until we have a parking plan, don't really know how much pavement will be needed.
And if the zoning change were approved today, but the improvements required weren't made for a year, then the zoning would revert back. Is that accurate on a case like this? In other words?
I don't think so. The zoning will stay. They'll simply have to. They'll be getting permits for this parking area. It's commercial. So legally, they wouldn't be allowed to operate until they're in compliance.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions of the applicant? Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you. Anybody else here to speak on this item? Please come forward and give us your name and address.
My name is Jay Melzer. I live at 5445 North Sedgwick, which is 2 houses down. A couple issues is it's just not a food truck. It's also, they have a support trailer behind that. There is also buildings that they built that holds true coolers that they have beverage drinks that stay there all the time. This trailer doesn't move. It stays there 24/7. They have brought in power to shore power. I'm not for sure how they're going to get their water, but where this was at previous by the liquor store, they were sharing water from the liquor store and the sewer. So I'm not for sure how they're going to get that out either without illegal dumping or their grease trap as well. So I'd like to know that. The parking, they where this trailer was parked at before, they had big trucks. Fire trucks would show up just to eat and whatever, general use. But if they only pave half of that or concrete half of that area, they would have to park in the street. And if you have vehicles on each side, people with trailers or campers that live down that street will not be able to get through. I believe that concrete drive they put in place was not done by permit. There is a culvert that is right next to that stop sign where our water has to drain through. So they just poured concrete, and that is blocking up and now causing flood and heavy rains. There's also on that, I believe slide 3, the house is right across from that driveway. There's a school bus that parks there, the handicapped student, and it is a long time. When they stop, they're stopped there for several minutes, and that can cause a blockage on to Sedgwick or on 53rd, accessing that when they're offloading that student. So those are my concerns, is that this is not a show up for the day and leave. It stays there constantly, and they do have supply trucks that stay there, a permanent foundation structure that they have built, and that stays there all the time. So I'm not opposed to small businesses, but the company I work for is 90% small business related. So it was very hard to decide to come up here, but if they build a building and have it nice and, a structure, then that's one thing, but this is something that.
Sir,
they're showing.
your time's up.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional time?
Nope, I'm good. Jay Melzer, 545 North Sedgwick, zoning 2002-00009. Thanks.
1 second. Any questions to the speaker? Any questions?
Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else here to speak on this item? Please come forward, give us your name and address. You got 3 minutes. If you want to, you'll have to give them to staff and they will keep them.
My name's Anthony Kurt. I live at 5435 North Sedgwick. I live in the house just north of that property. My same concerns as what Jay's. Our main deal is we don't want them to enter off of Sedgwick. We want them to enter off of 53rd Street, and they need to build a fence down there because 90% of everything's going to get blocked on that road and cause a lot of headaches and problems for all of us in the neighborhood. The late hours, staying open, and the smell, I think is probably going to get everybody in our neighborhood. Everybody on our street did sign a petition to not have it on the trailer or not in the property. And I do have pictures as well. And that's all I got to say. My name's Anthony Kurt.
Hang on. Any questions to the speaker? Seeing none, thank you.
Okay.
Anybody else here in the chamber want to speak on this item? Is there anybody virtual that want to speak on this item? Oh, Mr. Nix?
I'm pretty sure we have the operator of the food truck here. I'd like to hear what she has to say.
Let's see if there's anybody else wants to speak.
She's here and like that.
In the rebuttal?
In the
Oh,
rebuttal.
during rebuttal? Oh, I'm sorry.
Is there anybody virtual want to speak on this item? Anybody virtual? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the applicant, and you got 2 minutes for rebuttal. Give us your name and address, please.
My name is Elise Montante. My address is 1321 North Market. I'm the owner of the food truck. And we have customers, but mostly they come pick it up and leave. So I'm planning to have some kind of drive-through where they can order, and it won't be, I mean, we are a very, very fast food restaurant. They don't wait even 3 minutes to pick an order. So I don't think I don't think it's gonna be a parking problem. And we're very quiet. I used to, the food truck, it was close to a house behind, and he never complained about noise or nothing or bad smell. I go through all the rules of the health department. We use like everything, like every time we got the health department inspections, and they will go through past them at the first time they get there. You use water, like purified water, and I got a grease trap on the food truck. They come and check it. We clean it 3 days a week. So I make sure we don't do any damage to the environment. And of course, I don't think we're gonna do any problem to a neighborhood with a lot of cars or big trucks over there. Because most of the big trucks, they come, they order, and they leave. And most of them, they park sometimes on the streets, or they go get gas, and they go get the food, and they leave. And yes, I'm planning to have a parking lot. We're planning to make a part of the area parking lot with pavement. I mean, we're trying to do everything right. And there's a lot of people there asking us for come back. Because we provide good food, good service, and we're trying to run better to the neighbors. I mean, back in the liquor store, we operated for almost 2 years. We never had that problem, except with the store manager from the liquor store. But other than that, you never have problems with traffic and nothing like that. I mean.
Anything else? Thank you.
Just one comment. He refers that we put a driveway or an approach with a building permit or anything. I have the building permit, and we've done all legally that way it's supposed to be.
Okay.
And if that requires for us to put an approach or driveway on 53rd, I mean, we'd be happy to do it. It's just that, but the water he was talking about is going to flood and all this stuff on the east side of the property, which has been flooding. And I mean, we're willing to put a channel, concrete channel, all the way to the drainage. This right there, right by the 53rd. And the reason I'm doing this, we've been trying to do something. The city required for us to put a metal building. I went and hired an architect. I bought that metal building, and when Walmart came in, they gave me all these brand new requirements, which I already spent close to $75,000. They charged us $80,000 to put that sewer line, which we spent a lot of money. And so far, we haven't really got any money back by renting it or selling it or anything, was that problem. But whatever that is, we're willing to accommodate with whatever requirements that you guys have.
Okay, thank you. Your time's up. Thank you.
Got one question for him.
Hey, come back, sir.
Excuse me, sir. Yeah. You said you got a building permit or construction permit for the approach.
Yes.
The driveway.
Yes.
There appears to be some sort of a structure on
Structure?
like a building of some sort on
No, none.
Is that there all the time? Do you bring it in
No,
and
no,
out?
the one was there at the beginning, or the one shows on the picture.
Yeah.
It's like a little boxes where we nail the zoning sign on both sides of the property. And some of the stuff that they brought in, sits on the northwest corner. But that stuff is it's not gonna be there. Even if she comes in, we're gonna make sure that looks decent. I don't want to have no chicken coop or anything like that. It's gonna be something where it doesn't give up bad, I don't know, comments by the neighbors or whatever that might be.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thanks.
I don't even know where we're at. Is there anybody virtual want to speak on this item? I may already ask this, but I want to ask again. Anybody virtual want to speak on this? I can bring it back to commission. What's the pleasure of the board?
I'd like to move to approve per staff comments.
I'll second it.
Got a motion approved by Ms. Foster, second by Mr. Nix. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
Aye.
Okay, now we're gonna go, huh? Or was that just a late no?
Roll call?
Voting in favor or in opposition?
Mr. Blick?
Yes. It's an aye.
Okay, thank you. Now we're gonna go back to item 4.7, 2022-000007.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I contacted the agent for this one. His name is Daryl, and I believe he's joined us by phone. Daryl, are you there?
I am here, yes, I can hear you.
Perfect, thank you very much.
Okay, we was ready to hear from him, wasn't we? Applicant or agent, give us your name and address, please.
Yeah, this is Daryl Lakeview, XL Custom Construction, 2605 11th in Wichita. I'm the general contractor on the project. And this is on Fairview, is that correct? We had two today.
Yes.
Okay. The purpose for changing the zoning is part of enhancing the property and making it viable, not just financially, but aesthetically, is to be able to add a few more units to the apartment. We're going to upgrade the parking. I know that previous ownership allowed parking in the front yard. We're going to put an end to that. We'll add more paving to the back. And the way that this works financially, basically, is we add more units to make it more viable financially. Then we can spend money on doing the paving. We're going to upgrade the building in general. When we're finished, we want it to look like a new property. And that's why we're requesting the zoning change so that we can add more units.
Are you in approval or agreeable to the staff comments?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of the agent? Any questions?
Well, you say you want to make it look new, but this is a historic district, so the idea would be to have it reflect the nature of the neighborhood and keep its historical qualities. Have you already looked into the historic board requirements for this property since it's on the register, or how are you looking at that aspect?
We will keep it. We'll be in the neighborhood, and it will match the neighborhood. All of the properties that my client works on across the city he has that policy. He wants it to be part of the neighborhood. So yes, it will stay within the design, look, the colors, et cetera, of the neighborhood.
Any other questions?
How many units do you believe are necessary to make this a viable project?
I'm so sorry, say again?
How many units are you planning to make this a viable project?
We're looking at of adding a minimum of 3, but we're not firm on that. If we get approval on this, we want to look and see what the property will allow space parking. So we'd be looking at 3. Part of that would be raising, putting in some second floor on the rear building. It has a partial second floor area now. So minimum 3, we may look at more as space allows.
Okay, thank you.
And something I would like to add, again, the client not only raises these properties up to better quality, and he makes sure they meet the design of the neighborhood, but he has an excellent in-house management team that is constantly monitoring the property daily. And it just brings more to the neighborhood. It will be well managed, kept clean, and the residents are always. We work with the residents regularly to make sure they're happy. If you have happy tenants, then you have a happy property. That's kind of his philosophy.
Thank you. Any other questions of the speaker? Okay, I'm going to open it up. Anybody here in the commission chambers want to speak on this item? Please come forward and give us your name and address. And you'll have 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Janice Bradley, and I own the properties at 208 and 214 Buckridge Court. I've lived in this neighborhood for about 26 years, and I've seen this house get even worse from when I first moved in. For a number of years, the alley was open, but in the last, maybe 10 or 15 years, that alley has been closed, and things got a lot better when that happened. I live on Buckridge Court, which is a strange little, it's not a street, it's my driveway, and I'm actually closer to the alley than I am to Fairview. So I see what goes on in the alley, and the people on Waco do not have on-street parking. Very few of them have actual driveways, so many of them make their backyards into parking areas. And so the alley is already used tremendously. Right where my house is, there's an electrical pole, and there's a huge gash in the alley, a puddle area, and that's mainly because of the utility trucks that have to come in and work on the Cox or Evergy lines that are running down the alley. So I'm real concerned about the extra traffic in the already overused alley there. And I know it's unusual, we don't have the trash trucks there anymore, but the traffic on Waco on a few of these blocks is substantial in the alley. And those houses on Waco have very short yards compared to the lots on Fairview. They're very unequal. The lots on Fairview are 305 feet. And anyway, I would like to also, this commissioner brought up, you can't see the, you can't read the blurry plans here. And my understanding is the building that they're looking to renovate is really actually 2 buildings already, but there's a stucco building that's 2-story now, and a sided building, and they are very small buildings. I have the appraiser's report, and they're like 20 by 18 is one of them. So they're wanting to build on. Anyway, we've had problems with parking. People don't really like to park that far from their house, and going all the way to the back when you live in that front building, people end up parking in the front yard.
Ma'am, your time's up. Do you need any additional time?
Well, I did have a question. I did send in my comments after the 10 a.m. deadline yesterday, but I didn't know if they would be recognized or received. And I did get comments from other people who sent them in as late or later than I did. So that was Ms. Moreno and Ms. Lister. I don't know if they're on the
We're going to find out.
online.
We're going to find out.
You did? Okay. Thank you.
Is there any question?
Yeah, I've got a question.
Mr. Green's got a question.
There's been some discussion about the condition of that alley, not only from people on the commission, but also, you've mentioned something about that.
Excuse me, I get into this queue.
Excuse me? My question is, when was the last time that there was any maintenance done on that alley? And actually, who performs the maintenance? I'm assuming that the Public Works with the city
Yes, I
would be
believe so.
maintaining that?
And they've come by and they've graded it and they started adding asphalt to it, which I don't particularly like. But one of the problems is they keep adding stuff and they never take it away. So now the alley is higher than some of the yards in Waco where people park, and the water is draining off the alley into their yards. This is particularly in the middle of the block, not at the ends where the water drains out the driveway. But it's already, a problem like that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. Next speaker, please.
How do I get in the queue here?
Hang on one second. We've got a couple, 3 people here in the chamber, and after that, we'll have you.
Thank you.
My name is Marcia Schrader. I own the property at 1645 Fairview, which is just north of 1641. For almost as long as I can remember, this house has been an eyesore. And I think adding half a dozen shoebox apartments in the back is not going to improve the house. I think they need to start with the house in front and work those problems first. And I think there may be some problems with the buildings in back, because those have been added on to and then some taken off, and then a little wash house added on and then it wasn't used. The one-story house in back was built as a 2-bedroom house, and for a long time a family of 4 lived there. And then someplace down the line it got cut into half of a house. There was a significant fire. There was a fire in the big house in front, and I'm not sure how well that was repaired or what inside damage was done. My concerns about it are this looks like it's going to be really close to my property, like they're scooting really close to the fence line. The parking in back, I don't think people are going to use. They're going to park on the street. And I think if they open up a gate on that alley, there's a lot of traffic in that alley, a lot of foot traffic. North High kids walk home that way. A lot of men walk up and down that alley. I see them when we're in the garden. And I'm concerned about opening a gate and a security problem.
Okay. Anything else, ma'am?
I think that's it.
All right. Any questions of the speaker? Thank you. Anyone else want to speak on this item? Please come forward.
Can I get?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Timothy Young. I live at 214 West Buckridge in Wichita, which is approximately 120 feet from the subject property. I wrote a fairly detailed analysis that I spent quite a bit of time on, and I'm curious whether or not you all got to see it. You did? Okay, good. So I won't go through that verbatim, but I'll just get to the major points. And a lot of it the major point really is built around strategy 6 of the Places for People plan, which encourages infill and redevelopment that is contextual to the environment which is occurring. And that contextual is the key word. This zoning ordinance, the zoning ordinance describes TF3, which is the current zoning for the property, as moderate density, and MF29, which is the target zone, as high density. The only high-density residential development in a 25 block area around the parcel is on Waco, and it contains 11 living units, and it faces Waco, and it's close to 14th, and it's more than 2 blocks away from the subject property. And you might want to note that that 11 living unit parcel, it's zoned TF3, so it's out of compliance. This rezone going to MF29 would allow a minimum of 15 cars in the parking lot behind the buildings. And depending on how many 2-bedroom residences they put in it, it could go to 20. The parking lot would be accessed from what is a quiet residential street, Fairview, and an unimproved alley unsuitable for additional traffic. One of the commissioners asked whether that alley was opened from the other residences. Based on my knowledge, all the residences that face on Fairview are fenced off. The residences that face Waco, the majority of those have automobile access to the back of the house from the alley. So there's already, that's 3 minutes. May I continue?
You still had 40 seconds.
So there's already too much traffic down that alley. So what's to be done? So I just want to leave you with the fact that it's not contextual. The rezone is not contextual with the neighborhood. It doesn't conform with the plan, and it doesn't conform with the neighborhood plan either, and that's admitted by the staff. So what's to be done? All of us here that live in this neighborhood want to see that property improved, and I personally believe that, you know, the owner of the property has the right to recover some money from their investment. So what I'm recommending is, rather than an MF29, that you rezone it, you leave it as a TF3, and apply a conditional use permit that will allow multiple dwellings on the property, and that would bring it into zoning compliance. And hopefully the developer can make some nice units there that are compatible, contextual with the neighborhood, and recoup his investment. So I'll leave it there, and thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, I'm willing to.
Any questions?
Yes, sir. Sir, you brought something up that gave me a need for a staff question. Within the zoning rules that we got now, number of parking would be determined by the number of units or the number of or the amount of square footage of the units. Is that a fair way of looking at that?
It would be determined by the number of bedrooms in the units. So 1.25 spaces per 1-bedroom dwelling units, and then 1.75 per 2 or more.
And if they couldn't provide enough parking to provide that, then they would have to reduce the number of bedrooms.
Correct. They would only be allowed to have.
The driver is the amount of parking. It's not the number of units you put in. It's the amount of parking that you could do is going to limit how large you can, how many units you can put into it.
Right, the number of bedrooms, but the minimum if they go to 12 is 15.
If they can't put parking, they can't do 15.
Well, there's room for 15 cars in that area. And
backyard?
Yeah, but it's not so, parking is a problem, but the other issue is the traffic. Fairview is a quiet street. It's the only street between Waco on the west and Broadway on the east, between 13th and 17th, that isn't a traffic arterial. Every other street, north and south, is traffic arterial. And so you're adding, you're at a minimum doubling the number of cars that are going to be using Fairview, and potentially almost tripling it, going from, I don't know what it is now, 6 or 7 to potentially 20. So.
Any other questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms.
How
Cunningham?
many units do you think ought to be there? Because we don't know how many
Yeah,
many
perfect.
units he wants to put in.
Right. In a perfect world, I would prefer that it go back to duplex, triplex. But, you know, that's an unreasonable expectation, and I think a good compromise is a TF3 with a conditional use permit. I think I can tolerate 6. That's what it's been, although the assessor's office notes 7. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nobody else here in the commission wants to speak on this item? Now we'll go to the virtual calls. Who's virtual want to talk on this item? Give us your name and address.
My name is Kim Dumford. I live at 1624 North. I'm kind of sympathetic with the owners because 50 years I've been a real estate investor. Everyone knows when you try to rezone, I've won some, lost some, but there's always the NIMBY, not in my backyard. In this case, I'm on the block. And the Park Place Fairview Historical District is unique. It benefits Wichita. And as we blur that, it stops to benefit Wichita. I've loved the diverse aspect of this neighborhood and the diversity. But this is not, even the Midtown neighborhood plan recognize this is unique. Staff said, well, maybe they didn't understand how many apartments were there. I worked on that. There was 10 mailboxes on the front of the house. We knew how many apartments were there. We said single detached duplex. That's perfect. And I, with your prior person who said, well, we could give a conditional use to 6 units. I can agree with that because I've been in every unit in that house more than once, and there's not a lot of features there. No one's going to go in there and restore that house to its glory. So there has to be some economic reality. But the idea that this house has to go into 12 units, and they talk about on the places for people plan that it would be contextual with the neighborhood. There's 3 duplexes, 3 blocks. These houses were built as duplexes, 3 duplexes in 3 blocks. There's nothing contextual about 12 or 15 units in this house. These people, I wish them well, but they should be able to make economic reality and stick. That's the way I feel.
Thank you, sir. Anything else?
Well, they refer to it as small scale multifamily in your staff report. And I understand apartment complexes. This is a residential. There's 1 rental house on this block. Almost all of them are owner occupied, but it doesn't matter if they're rentals or if they're owner occupied. But for this neighborhood, that's not small scale. That's a big deal. And so my position is the community investment plan, Wichita Places for People plan, is a micro view. We're up real high and we're talking about how we plan for the city. But when the Midtown.
Sir, your time's up.
Into a micro.
Your time's up. Do you need additional time? Your time's up. Do you need some additional time?
All I want to say is, I would just ask that all of you just look at this from a micro view. And if you would want that across the street from your house,
okay,
neighborhood, then vote for it.
Thank you. Any questions to speak?
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Is there anybody else virtual that wants to speak on this item?
I would like to speak.
Give us your name and address.
My name is Sharon Fury. I live at 323 North Market, and I am the property owner of 1655 Fairview. I'd like to give just a little bit of the history of the historic Midtown neighborhood. When the neighborhood was built, there really were no zoning codes or laws in the city. So when the zoning came about, most of that neighborhood was zoned in things like MF 29 for heavy uses. And I think a lot of that came about because of World War II. People had space. We had workers that needed housed. So they converted apartments, and we have this very heavy zoning. Several years ago, when we did the Midtown plan, our goal was to rezone as many of the properties as we could to their current use. I can't remember exactly why several of the properties on Fairview are still a heavier zoning with the MF 29, but we could not force anyone into rezoning. If they wanted to keep the current MF 29 zoning that they had, there was nothing we could do about it. So we just tried our hardest to get as many people and as many properties zoned as to a better use as we could. This property, if it worked through the plan the way I think it did, and we had, this whole plan was led by the city planning department. So it wasn't just a group of neighborhoods. We had lawyers and planners and all those kind of people. The preference would be for this property to go back to what its original use was, which would be the TF3. We actually were hoping to do more single family, but planning did suggest that if people wanted a garage apartment or something like that, that we go with the 2-family. So we did that. But the dream would be that this was originally a single family residence, and that if the property were destroyed in the fire, like was there about 30 years ago, or, you know, a natural disaster or something, that then when it was being rebuilt, it would be single family, because that was how the neighborhood was originally built. So when it says here that as the property appears to have been operating as a multifamily use at the time of the neighborhood plan, it's possible that this was unknown to those creating the future land use concept. Well, if that's addressing those of us who did the plan, it was not unknown. We knew what we were doing, and we were led by city staff. So I just think that this property has been an eyesore.
Ma'am,
Yes?
your time's up. Do you need additional time?
Just a tiny bit.
1 minute.
This property has been an eyesore, but it doesn't need to continue to be. And the dream would be that it someday be a single family. So I agree that to have a conditional use put on it for the number of units that are currently there and not expanding it would be more palatable to me as a property owner. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions of the speaker? Seeing none, thank you. Is there anybody else virtual that want to speak on this item?
I would like to speak.
Give us your name and address, please.
My name is Claire Willenberg, 1402 North Garland. Through the past few decades, I've served on the City Historic Preservation Advisory Board, currently a member again. I've been a residential realtor for 30 years. I specialize in older and historic homes. This home was built, the original one, probably around 1920, the second around 1930. I agree with Sharon Fury. There were incentives for large home owners, and especially Midtown responded to take in boarders for the war effort as we were gearing up our aircraft capacities. It is in a triple listed National Historic District. It is not individually listed to my knowledge. but this designation acknowledges the historic and architecturally significant housing and the environs of the neighborhood. The period of significance is 1886 to 1944. Historic districts have been proven to attract tourism, and it increases and maintains property values within that district. They are a treasure that need to be protected. As in our older neighborhoods, they have no active covenants to protect them, and the zoning protections are spotty at best and often ineffective. As to places for people comments, in this case, adding housing density is not an effective method to attract new residents, as most likely it will negatively affect the quality of life and the character of the neighborhood. Most residents choose these districts because of the historic qualities, and those qualities should be protected. Inserting this size multifamily housing with its required parking area will detrimentally affect the integrity of this district and the neighborhood properties. It is not in compliance with the historic Midtown neighborhood plan. It does not improve walkability. The neighborhood is already walkable, already has diversity of housing. But as mentioned before, there never was and should not be non-compliant, non-compatible multifamily housing stuck in the middle. We don't have the infrastructure, we have narrow streets, we have people who must park in the street already. This is not a feasible plan to improve the neighborhood. Staff notes up to 12 apartments, so please help us protect these neighborhoods. Deny the proposed zoning change. Consider bringing the property into compliance with the conditional use permit, allowing up to current 6 or 7 apartments. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of the speaker?
I have one. I don't know if Claire knows or not, but when did the historic neighborhood plan go into effect? When was it written?
If you're talking about the Midtown,
right,
Sharon Ferry would be the person to ask.
Unless somebody
And
else knows.
I would imagine either Sharon or Joan Cole was city council representative for District 6 when we got those districts nominated to the National Register. Sharon, do you have that answer?
When it was made a historic district?
No,
Yes.
when was the
Staff's
historic
going to answer
plan?
that. Staff's going to answer this question.
Okay.
Okay, your plan.
It was made a historic district in 1978, I believe. The Midtown plan, do you know the year of that?
I believe that was 2003, 2002.
That sounds right, early 2000s.
Okay. Any
Yeah,
other
that
questions
sounds
of the last
correct.
speaker?
Yes.
Seeing none, thank you. Is there anybody else virtual that wants to speak on this item? Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, we'll have some rebuttal. 2 minutes.
Can I just comment on
No.
they can't park in the front yard?
I'm looking for
still
the.
here.
Okay, here we go.
Got
2 minutes for rebuttal.
The agent.
Is that for me? I've
Yes.
Hi, it's Daryl. Are you? Am I able to speak now?
Yes.
Agent.
Okay, yeah. What I'd like to mention to everybody, I understand concerns. The rehab and remodel is inside and outside. And when I say it'll look brand new, it won't be ultra modern, anything like that. It will meet the requirements of the neighborhood, any historic concerns, et cetera. And quite honestly, the economics says the more units we have in a property, the more economically we're able to do those things. Otherwise, it's limited on what we can do. Since the property is there and multifamily now, adding more simply makes the economics work better to enhance it. Anything that's done is better than what's available there now. And as far as the alley goes, that's a topic that we've not discussed, but I know the property owner will be very easy to work with on working with the city and the neighborhood on what to do about the alley.
Okay,
Thanks. Thank you.
now we'll bring it back to commission.
I have a question for the agent. Have you done any market studies on what you could do with this property with fewer units, but fewer perhaps larger units, which might help address the traffic issues, but still work for your economic analysis?
The short answer is no, we've not done that study, but the experience with the client has with residential properties in the Wichita area in many different neighborhoods is what we're basing the design and the request on for changing the zoning. It's based on the experience of this company and the properties they own. And the owner is a local resident who owns properties all over the city in many different neighborhoods, and not just residential, but commercial, and brings everything back to not just looking great, but historically great. So the answer to your question is no, but based on the experience, I would say he's probably an expert on what makes a property work and work in the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Mr. Dole, did you have?
I have a couple of questions and comments. One has to do with the ownership, and I understand that this is a realtor. It says Bel Air Properties. Maybe somebody lives in Bel Air, I don't know. But it may not be appropriate for us to find out more about who that owner is to maybe get some credibility on what they're going to do. But beyond that, this is a classic example of homeowners associations, in this case, a historical designation of somebody who's let the property run way down. And the recourses to that are to try to enforce the covenants or the city regulations and maybe ultimately put a lien on the property if they're not in compliance with regulations or homeowners agreements. But I don't think the solution to the problem here is to substantially increase the density of this property. That's all I've got to say.
Any other discussion? Looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion. I'd like to make a motion to deny the FM 29 and look at the conditional use. Leave it at 6 units.
If I may, I'd like to provide just some options for you to consider in order to accomplish that. Currently, so it's currently TF3, which would allow up to 3 dwelling units. And the request is for MF29, which would allow, considering the size of the property, would allow a maximum of 12 units. In between those two zoning classifications is MF18. MF18 would allow for 7 units. Now, if you wish to have a maximum number of units somewhere in between one of those, I would recommend that you go with the higher zoning district and then place a protective overlay on it to restrict it down to the number of units that you would want. For instance, if you wanted 6 dwelling units, I would recommend rezoning it to MF18, placing a protective overlay on it, and having the protective overlay restrict it to 6 units.
How far does the overlay, is it confined to that property, or is it?
Yes, it would be confined just to this particular property.
I'm thinking an MF-18 is a reasonable compromise. 6 or 7 units, we haven't even established whether that's what's already been existing for decades. I don't know. It's a difficult option between that and the TF3 with a conditional use for 6.
Would we gain anything by deferring? If we did
No.
an amendment? I don't think we would.
Decide, I think.
Can we repeat that motion?
Well, I don't
Are
think
you want to
that-
amend the motion, or you
there
want me
was
to
no
do a
second. There was
substitute
no
motion?
second.
Okay, never mind.
There was no second to the original motion.
Okay, I would like to make a motion that we change the TF3 zoning to MF18 zoning on this property.
Got a motion, do I have a second? I'll second. Any
Make a
discussion?
substitute motion.
I'm sorry?
I'd like to make a substitute motion.
Okay,
Talking with Mike, the bottom line is we're trying to figure out how many units. We're gonna come up with something with units. I'm comfortable with 10, so my motion would be substitute motion would be to approve an MF29 with a protective overlay limiting the number of units to 10.
And I'll second that. And the reason why I'm in favor of this is understanding that the property itself may or may not be up to standards, may or may not be up to where the neighborhood would like to have it be. However, when they do go to make the improvements to this property with additions, all of those are going to be required to go before a review design board to approve what is being proposed. Keeping that in mind, I have no problems whatsoever with the motion of making it MF29 with a maximum of 10 units.
any other discussion? We'll vote on the substitute motion first.
Would you like roll call, sir?
Probably.
I suppose we
So
better.
this one is for MF 29 with an overlay? 10.
Yes. Motion is for approval of MF 29 with the protective overlay to limit the number of units on the property to 10. Bill Johnson?
I second the original motion, but since there's a difference of 7 to 10, I'm gonna vote in favor of the 10.
Fox?
No difference between 7 and 10 when you've got single family on either side or duplexes, to me, is a significant difference.
John McKay is absent. Green?
Aye.
Dual? No. Dual votes no. Blick? Mr. Josh Blick?
Caller number 3.
Mr. Josh Blick, are you there? Okay. Absent. Nix?
No.
Foster?
No.
Warren?
Yes?
Joe Johnson?
No.
Miles?
No.
Hartman?
No.
Florence is absent. Cunningham?
No.
1, 2, 3 in favor. 8 against. Motion fails.
Okay, now we're gonna go back to the original motion, which was to do MF 18
Yes.
instead of TF 3. Oh,
Yes, sir. Original motion to approve with MF 18,
Which will allow 7
which would allow up to 7 units.
units, okay.
Bill Johnson?
yes.
Fox? John McKay is absent. Green?
Aye.
Dual? Yule votes no. Josh Blick is absent. Nix.
Yes.
Foster. Warren.
Yes.
Joe Johnson.
No.
Miles.
No.
Hartman.
Yes.
Florence is absent. Cunningham? No. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in favor. 4 against. Motion passes.
Okay, with that said, is there any other business?
To officially announce that there's no BZA meeting, or?
Yeah, there's no BZA meeting today.
There, it's been official.
Thank you.
Wait, nobody's retiring today?
You're making me want to, but no.
We need some cookies.
All right, we're adjourned. All right.